Welcome to The Criminologist, the podcast dedicated to educating and entertaining our listeners. We bring you subject matter experts from around the world and share the latest and greatest evidence-based practices and interventions to help individuals desist from a life of crime and delinquency. This podcast avoids stereotypes and biases in favor of the lived experiences of those we can best learn from. Now, please welcome the host of The Criminologist, Joseph Arvidsson.
Hello, and welcome to episode 116 of The Criminologist podcast. Happy to have you all with us today. Grab your listener passports, my friends, for we are going international once again today. Taking you to the mountainous Caucasus region nestled between Asia and Europe. That's right, friends. We are returning to the nation of Armenia. Arshak Gasparyan, as you are all about to discover, is an incredible individual. He is joining us all the way from his home nation of Armenia, where he is truly a trailblazer when it comes to his efforts around implementing core correctional skills, prison design, and a host of other initiatives. He is currently a consultant working with the Council of Europe, developing Armenian probation services as well as mental health care in Armenian prisons. Arshak is also the president of the Social Justice NGO, whose mission is to implement projects aimed at restoring social justice within society. Now, their activities also include reform efforts regarding detained persons, helping them integrate as full members of society. Now, this is actually Arshak's second visit to the Criminologist podcast. He joined us way back on episode 65 and has graciously agreed to chat with us again to share his incredible insights. Please sit back and enjoy my second interview with Arshak Gasparyan, and I will see you all on the other side. Well, welcome back to the show, Arshak. Why don't we start off by telling our audience a little bit about yourself? Again, I know you appeared back in episode 65, so some audience members may be familiar with you, but for those who are not, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience and just maybe talk about some of those milestones in your career, both educationally and professionally, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. This is always my pleasure to be your guest, to be in the list of all these brilliant professionals who usually are your guests. So this is always my pleasure, and thank you for inviting me to this show. I'm Arshak Gasparyan. I'm from Armenia, a very small country with a very big ambitions. So we are trying to reform our penal system, and I'm a psychologist as my background and diploma and PhD in psychology, and also lawyer in criminal law. And my passion is prison and probation system and the criminal justice system at all, but in particular the penal system regarding how to reform the prisons and probation. And I'm in this field since 2001. This is already 20 to 23 years. So my whole young ages went to these systems. Yeah, but this is great. This is my love and passion for reforming for people and reforming the systems. So I'm working for Armenia, and not only for my country, but also for Uzbekistan, for Moldova, for Montenegro, for Georgia, and different countries for reforming the rehabilitation system for offender management and rehabilitation part and resocialization, and how to deal with dynamic security, how to catch the balance between the physical and dynamic part, the regime, and how to keep this regime, but also love the job and the ethics. So this is the very good item for me. And also I work for Council of Europe, for United Nations, different agencies sometimes. And I'm also the president in my country of the Social Justice NGO, which deals with which acts since 2011 and deals with criminal justice system and plus juvenile justice. So We are keen on pushing our country to develop more and more in alternatives to incarceration and imprisonment. So regardless, I was the team lead of building the new prison in my country. But yeah, that's it.
Well, let's dive into that. In fact, you mentioned a term earlier, dynamic security, which some listeners may or may not be familiar with. But recently, a concept model for a new prison was presented to the Prime Minister of your Republic of Armenia. And I realize that nothing has been officially published yet as to that project, but can you share some of the themes around that? Again, I talked about dynamic security, or striking that balance between security and rehabilitation, and what went into the design of the prison in consideration of those two variables?
Yeah, thank you. I was honored and happy to be invited to be a team leader in our country to build a new prison. But I want to, from the first words, I want to say that this was not the concept about building a prison, but this was about how to reform your penal system. Because I guess we all understand that if you close down one prison, this is not about 100 or 200 or 800 people. This is about your system, how it works. So the whole concept consisted of three main concepts. And this is how to build, or why to build the new prison. And this new prison was something like restructure or reform type of Pennsylvania system. So if we can see the Auburn type and Pennsylvania type, this is something Pennsylvania type to, in sense of measuring or balancing between regime and this dynamic security, how to rehabilitate people. And the concept was based on how to build for rehabilitation. And this is also some terminology from Europris and different kind of organizations who deals with these issues. So what we try to do, the legal consultants, the economist, the architecture, and me, and all the Ministry of Justice and prison system and probation, ex-prisoners, prisoners who are sentenced in the prison. We were trying to figure it out how to build a prison which will try at least to make people better than they were before entering the prison. So, of course, this prison is much more secure and safe, and it should be impossible to escape from there. But besides these walls that we can have, our mission and my vision for this prison was how to build a prison, how to build up with also the staff to have this dynamic security and this positive attitudes towards these prisoners, and how to deal with people, with just practical with people, and how to build this system. So this was about the concept and how to build these green areas, the architecture, the factories, the educational part, which will be obligatory for, at least in our country, for all the people who do not have the certificate for school. So we will provide them this this background and secondary education, let's say, just as terminology. And this was a very great idea to. I want the listeners, just our audience, to know that I'm me as personal and our organization, we are keen on pushing alternatives in our country to the imprisonment. So this was very unique, and also some specialists in Armenia just were very scared, or it was very difficult for them to understand how I can lead the group who is dealing with building new prisons. But I want to say that, of course, I am not keen on building new prisons, and new prisons will not solve the problems you have. So if you have problems with the attitudes, criminal subculture, torture, the new buildings will not solve the problem, but new buildings will solve the problem that you will not have worse prisons for them. So, and the second one is how to measure this big or small prisons, and how to close down more than you are opening. So we are closing down 4 different types of prisons in our capital city, in Yerevan, and we are building just one, which is 3 times less, which will keep 3 times less prisoners than we have in these 4 prisons. So this was also my just requirement to our government that I will lead this group, but we must have this kind of requirements. One of these was we must close down all different prisons because they are economically, socially, and psychologically they are not acting effectively and efficiently. So this was the main request from my side, the requirement to lead this group, and this is really honor. And yesterday, today, I was aware that Prime Minister gave this adoption for building this prison and to build up with new staff, really, because it is very difficult to build new ideas, rehabilitation work, resocialization, how to work with the people from the first day of their sentencing with the let's say experienced staff, or the staff which is thinking not enough good for these kind of ideas.
So let me ask a question here, and you brought up staffing consideration, and again, when we talk about changing culture, agency culture, for example, what sort of thought went into, or again, even training around, again, not just physically building this new prison, but also training going into staffing the prison?
We have different levels. I can just divide the answers to the different levels. One level is about legislation. What we are trying to do, again, conceptually, as a strategy or concept in our country, we must have our own recruitment and training requirements and educational requirements for new staff bringing to the prison. What we have now, this is something from the system which is generation from the Soviet Union. So part of our staff is not recruited, but is examined by the police or Ministry of Interior. So we must change this, and legally we will change it. So we will have the first line and front line. This is legislation. The second line is developing the criteria for recruiting these people. And these criteria will be based on the 2019 recommendations or guidelines from Council of Europe for recruiting, training, and education for prison and probation staff, which means that we must understand what is education and what is training. So in-service trainings and the other the initial trainings that we must provide to our prison staff. And the other level is how to train these people who are new, and how to build your hope and your beliefs on the new stuff. Because all the new things, they can have advantages and disadvantages, and how to prepare and predict the risks that can bring the new stuff, which your previous stuff does not have or exist. And they can bring the other culture, and they can bring the other mindsets. But this is what we want. So we understand that we can be mistaken with the new stuff, but this is more effective than to hire the others who are already in the system, which is totally different. So in that system, we have much more regime, much more security, which is not bad. So in my speech, I don't want to have this measurement between the regime security and the resocialization, but I want to have this balance. So if you have this balance, and regardless of this, is this balance between on the dynamic security or on the rehabilitation or on the regime. If you have this balance, you mean you do not have good management system in your country and this prison. So this is about the stuff what we're trying to solve in the future, in near future.
Yeah, it sounds like you've got a handle on what we refer to as implementation science, Arshak. That is great. So you shared with me some details of the new concept prison, which I had a chance to review. Personally, I love comparing and contrasting other systems of justice. One thing that stuck out for me rather was the breakdown of the proposed 850 or so prisoners as it relates to housing considerations. Mm-hmm. In the United States, for example, we don't have the issue of housing foreign citizens, and I saw that was built into the design. I also noted a reference to housing, quote, former employees of the law enforcement system, unquote. Can you just maybe touch on the diversity of residents that you had to take into consideration with this project?
Yes, of course. I have shared, and I will share now, because this is very interesting in the sense that we have different categories of prisoners, which are again our stems from post-Soviet Union states, let's say. This is the one part of our contingent is former law enforcement officers, and you can see this kind of category of prisons and prisoners in post-Soviet Union country. And you can't see this kind of category of prisoners in Europe, in Canada, in New Zealand, or in US, or in other countries. This is what we have exactly now. So we have one separate prison acting only for the people who are former law enforcement officers.
Wow.
Plus tax officers, tax service officers, policemen, even military. So, and you know why? Because our prisoners, this is some part of prison subculture or criminal subculture that our usual prisoners, let's say, it is very difficult to keep them on the same prison because the investigators, because we are a very small country, everyone knows each other, and if your investigator is sitting with you in the same cell, this is very difficult to, really it is very difficult to have this security and to ensure the safety of these people. And what we have done, which is the most vulnerable part of this concept and this prison, this is that it is not so big, but this is big enough. And the most vulnerability is that we must keep their totally different contingents, totally different part of or types of prisoners. And we have four blocks, and one block is dedicated to law enforcement officers, which will have their working areas differently, and also high-risk offenders. We will have them for 50 or 60 people. We will have also the foreigners. Now we have nearly 150 foreigners in our country. And the others, adults. And this prison is only for adults. So there are different countries in Europe that they can keep also juveniles in one prison, separate, but in one prison. In our country, we did not go with this trap or path, and we want to have the juvenile system or a juvenile prison separately. And this is second concept that it is involved in this new concept. And we are trying to totally restructure just based on trauma-based and prison and people-based solution for juveniles and young adults until 25-year-old. So we will keep in this prison only youngers, and we will have but mostly rehabilitation programs for this kind of people, for juveniles and young adults. This is mostly Scandinavian system with a bungalow type of prisons, with this um, with this dormitory, but this is not a dormitory, but a bungalow type. So, and many social workers, educators, psychologists, and this is my passion again, because we are not building a new prison but we are trying to reallocate all the prisoners between more effective prisons. And this new prison, this is one, but the other, which will be restructured for only resocialization, this will be something like rehabilitation unit, rehabilitation center, or resource center. And this will change the system totally, because this new prison will deal with only very dangerous people. And this means that also we must have classification system, which is also something that it is in your passion, I know, Joe, the risk assessment and this kind of issues. And we will have the totally new classification system based on the people, based on the person, and not based on the article of criminal code that he has already been judged.
I just absolutely love that holistic approach you're taking to your prison incarceration system. And I know, or I caught rather, the word trauma earlier when you were talking about juvenile residents, which again, I just applaud the fact that you're looking forward with this. I was talking with Shad Maruna, and he's published on this, but he's talked about the fact that when we talk about those traditional criminogenic needs, he's pointed out, folks, incarceration in and of itself is a criminogenic need. So
that's it.
Not that we can avoid incarceration, but you need to take that into consideration. And earlier you mentioned the word trauma within the context of your juvenile facility. And I thought that's brilliant, because again, we're not taking into account, particularly with young individuals, that incarceration is re-traumatizing. And a lot of those folks are struggling so much with trauma to begin with, that if you don't take that into consideration, you're really doing a disservice to those folks, whether it's from the criminogenic angle or the trauma angle. So again, Arshak, I just applaud the fact that you're looking at this with a blank slate, saying, okay, how could we really build the perfect mousetrap here, so to speak? Yeah,
I do hope, really, because it is very ambitious project, and this is very ambitious plan for 3 years. Not three, but I guess until 2016. 3-4 years. So this is very ambitious, because this is not totally, but I guess even totally changing the philosophy of the penal system. So how we will do this is the biggest question, because again, we can speak and talk with days and months, but the people are the employees are important. So the staff who will do this. But regardless of this fact, my mission is idea. So my mission is conceptual thinking and not staffing, at least for now. But I guess we can handle it. Yeah.
Hey, it all starts with a great idea. I want to point out, and you mentioned this earlier, that this prison project included the input of those with lived experiences. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Which is something that, if I make some type of proposal about including lived experiences here in the United States, whether it's prisons or probation, we're unfortunately not really close to appreciating them as I refer to them, as the true subject matter experts. So shed a little bit of light on what that was like, talking to those folks with lived experience and getting their input into this prison project.
Yeah, thanks. Very, very nice question regarding also about the research that we have done, because of course, not only in US, also in our country, this is not exception regarding the people who do not want to talk about the new prison, etc. But Social Justice, our NGO, is dealing with people who are released, who are in the prison, regardless of their detainees or sentenced ones. And we have had we have had our list of participants or our clients for our NGOs and for our organization. And we have organized this kind of focus group and interviews. but not only with them, but also with the probation beneficiaries, with the probation officers, again, because they are dealing with the people who are released from the prison. So our stakeholders or respondents in this case was not only the Ministry of Justice, Prime Minister's office, etc., but the people who deals with the real beneficiaries, direct beneficiaries, who are the people, prisoners. One thing that we couldn't do because of the very short time, but it was planned and it was in our methodology. It was interviewing the family members of this kind of people, of our prisoners, which should have been very important part of this research. But I guess, and I promise for myself, at least, that the next time, if Armenia will try to do something like this, we must have enough time for this, because it was, the concept has been written in 3 months, and this is very unusual, because trying to build a new prison, some countries like UK, let's say, they develop their concepts for years, at least for 1 year. So in our case, we have had just 3.5, so close to 4 months. Okay. But it was really a very short time, and we were in rush, so we did not sleep all these 4 months, really, because it was sometimes it was political decisions, etc., etc. So this is not for sharing, but of course, 4 months it is not very usual thing for developing concept, not for your penal system. We collected people, ex-prisoners, which are our clients, ex-prisoners who released and they are under supervision in our probation system, and also the people who are sentenced in the prisons, because this concept also has the third part of this of penal reforms, and this is policy or changing or reforming the policy about occupation of the prisoners. It means also the out of cell activities, at least for 8 hours, so meaningful activity of the prisoners regarding the factory, businesses, resocialization programs, rehabilitation programs, and everything which connects or has ties with this occupation and resocialization of prisons. So we entered all 10 prisons in our country, and we talked to the prisoners and also the prison staff, and that was tough, really. So we had 100 pages of concept notes.
No, that's great to include their input. Say, changing gears a little bit, we were speaking offline a little bit about all of the training and travel you've been doing. Share some highlights. I know you were recently in Germany doing some training. Can you enlighten our listeners again about what else you've been up to besides prison design as of late, my friend?
It was not about training, but our new prison is a model from Offenburg. So in Offenburg, in Germany, they have built this kind of prison, and we went there for a study tour, so study visit, and we were trying to understand how can we build the similar something in our country, and also in Estonia, in Tallinn, and also in Viru, in different cities of Estonia. They also have very great reforms, and they have also changed the penal system, and they closed down for 9 prisons, and they have just 3. And we were trying to understand and changing the experience, what we have, because I remember that we have started our reforms with Estonia in 2001. And this was the year 2001 when we became a member of the Council of Europe. And and now we are we started on the same level, and now we are somehow behind. So the study tours and this change of experiences were in Estonia and in Germany, and that was very great, organized, and very well to understand, to see, because I guess every country has this saying that it is better to see once or hear for 1,000 times. So this is something that it was something like this.
Right.
So
exactly.
we could see what we wanted, but I think our part or our model is more effective. More effective regarding the rehabilitation programs, because these kind of prisons are really secure and safe, but it is question if are they rehabilitating people. So the model which we are trying to have, this is much more balanced or even more rehabilitation than just keeping people between these walls.
Exactly. I mentioned earlier that I'm fascinated looking at other systems. I follow your work and the work of your European colleagues. And one thing that I see pop up that I know our American audiences might not be as familiar with is I see this topic around radicalization and radicalization prevention.
Yeah.
Can you just share again for my American listeners who aren't familiar with that topic, what that is all about?
And the radicalization and extremism is something like a very interesting topic for my European colleagues. Unfortunately, this is something that Armenia has not, I don't know, but regarding the Council of Europe recommendation, I guess we still has not faced with this kind of issues. But this is something about, again, the mindset, the radicalized ideas and cognitions, which is very important and very difficult, but very dangerous thing that can, and I can see that it is very, not common, but very, important thing to work on, because European colleagues, as I can see, European countries face this kind of inhuman kind of behavior and really radicalization, or working for radicalization to not to eliminate maybe, but to decrease the number of these kind of people and how to work with them. And there are already different kind of rehabilitation manuals, how to work with them, how to work with the staff of the prisons for this dynamic security, how to make the relations with them, because it seems and it is evidence that they can be different from the only max security regime. This is not only about the regime, but also about the psychological issues and psychology of this kind of people, how they can be organized in one, let's say, religion. But this is not about the static religion, but this is about beliefs. So yeah, this is what our European colleagues do, and it is very interesting topic that I also want to. I'm also the member of Radicalization Awareness Network for prison and probation part, and I always in this news from RAN. Yeah.
So let me ask, I heard you just now talk about attitudes and beliefs, and earlier I heard that word cognition. So do these rehab manuals, or does this approach rather take on some of the familiar approaches that we would know through those traditional cognitive behavioral interventions?
Yeah.
And as far as addressing attitudes, beliefs, that type of thing?
The theories, theory of change, the prosocial modeling, problem solving, cognitive behavioral techniques, all these evidence-based practices, they are working with them. And the biggest issue is how to work, because sometimes it is very difficult because you do not have resources from the family, from the outside world. And this is something that is very unique for this kind of people. This is what,
So I mentioned you've been on the podcast before. If you have not caught Arshak in the past, go back and listen to episode 65. But for those who have not heard you before, can you maybe just share with our listeners, we've been talking a lot about this prison project, but maybe share the current status of probation services in Armenia and what your long-term goals are with Armenian probation.
We are on our way to establish different kind of let's say, platforms. One is e-probation that we are going it is already developed, and we are going to push it out and to have this e-probation for electronic version of risk and needs assessment. The biggest thing that we are going to do, this is build the interagency cooperation, because probation can't live without social, educational, clinical, and criminal justice actors and out of probation. The thing that we are going to do, and now we are going to build also also for the new prison staff, this is a step-by-step manual, which is something like SOP, the standard operational procedures for the people who, even who are newcomers, they can just list all these manuals and they can work for there. And this is what we are trying to do. We are trying to restructure different regional units in our country, which does not have or do have the office spaces, but we are trying to restructure them with different donor organizations, with Poland embassy, etc. And the biggest thing that we are going to do, this is the new law on probation, which will provide total independency of the probation service from the penitentiary service, but not only the independency, but also having independent financial resources, so own budgetary, let's say. So this is something that we are going to do. And the third one we are going to do, which will provide also the independency and the ethical part, this is that the job descriptions and all the requirement processes and educational and training processes that probation will do itself, and not the administration of the Ministry of Justice. And also we are going to develop and establish, it is already in piloting stage, and on Monday we will have this follow-up meeting with all the probation officers who are involved in this probation regarding rehabilitation programs, psychoeducational programs for our low and mid-level offenders, clients for the probation service. And we have this piloting service already piloting stage already 3 months. And the different probation officers have been trained how to organize these rehabilitation programs. Again, about prosocial modeling, problem solving, cognitive behavioral techniques, anger management, communication skills. These are a main training package which have been developed based on Juliana Carbonaro, you know her, report, and with Catherine Trommer, we have developed these rehabilitation programs, which will be redesigned after this piloting stage based on the results.
Thank you for reminding me. I've got to get Juliana on the show at some point. She is fantastic. Yeah. You mentioned your NGO, your Social Justice NGO earlier, Arshak. Is there anything you want to share with our audience about the great work you're doing with Social Justice NGO?
Our organization is deeply involved in judicial and legal reforms in our country since 2011. And we are one of the leading organizations in criminal justice reforms, mainly in penitentiary and probation. And our organization is also the member of different kind of local and international organizations. And we are also a member for, we have been expert group for National Preventive Mechanism. We are also the member of a prison monitoring group in our country. And also we are dealing with penal reforms, penitentiary and probation. We are working and now we are working with the European Union, with Council of Europe, with USAID, with different kind of donors. And now we are working with EU and Netherlands Helsinki Committee, with Penal Reform International, with other local NGO in our country to build up access to justice in our country. And for the 4 different strategies, monitor to different strategies. This is anti-corruption strategy. This is police strategy, penitentiary and probation, and judicial and legal reform. So we have this very huge program for my country. And our organization deals with also clients directly working with the prisoners in the prison and people who are out of prison. released, and we are trying to make rehabilitation programs for them, the self-development, anger management, stress management trainings for them. And our organization, main members of our organization are social workers, psychologists, one criminologist, lawyer, and we are just working with the Ministry of Justice, with the Penitentiary Department, with the Probation Service, and that's it. That's what we are doing. And also the second part is Justice for Children system, which we are going to push it out in our country. So just develop this. And also the third mandate for our Social Justice NGO was and is the combating domestic violence and training the police or law enforcement staff for combating this or prevention for domestic violence issues.
So much on your plate, Arshak. Whenever I think I'm busy, I've got to reflect on how busy your calendar must be.
Sometimes it can be, yeah.
Well, you noted the relatively small size of your country, but I'm confident that the people of Armenia are in good hands, and your stakeholders having a dedicated and passionate individual such as yourself at the helm of so many of these projects. Arshak Gasparyan, I cannot thank you enough for coming back to the show. I noted this is your second visit, and I am looking forward to the future someday to having you on for a third time, my friend.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Thanks a lot for your very kind words. Again, this is always my pleasure to be your guest, and I will be looking forward to hearing from you soon and to share with you different ideas that we will have and the development that we will have in Armenia. Thanks a lot, and looking forward to our next meeting.
Take care, Arshak.
Take care. Thank you very much.
As loyal listeners to the show are aware, we love bringing you international guests to share their experiences, and Arshak did not disappoint. You heard him reference the term dynamic security. That may be familiar to some of you, but if it is not, I encourage you all to go down that rabbit hole. In fact, if you want to learn more as to the differences between dynamic security and what we refer to as static security, check out episode 86 of the Criminologist podcast and hear my interview with Brian Kane. Brian is the head of an agency here in the United States known as Social Profit Corrections. And Brian and his team have embraced the idea of dynamic security. Check it out. A big Criminologist podcast thank you once again to Arshak Gasparyan. Looking forward to our next conversation, my friend. Now, if you or your agency are loyal listeners to the program and you appreciate the diversity of voices and opinions and theories that we bring you from around the globe, and you're asking yourself, hey, how can we support the Criminologist podcast in some way, shape, or form? I've got that answer for you. Simply go to the episode description of this program and click on the Become a Supporter link. By simply clicking on that link, you will learn details of how you may show your financial support for the Criminologist podcast. You may become a supporter of the program for as little as $3 per month, or you can save a little bit of money by opting to become a yearly supporter. Again, simply a way for you to show your appreciation for the show and help offset some of our overhead cost. Back next week with a fresh episode. In the meantime, you may contact the show or reach out to us through our website, the Paragon Group, LLC.com, for training or presentations as to core correctional skills, implementation, or of course, the topic of desistance from crime. If you have questions or comments as to this podcast, feel free to contact the show via our email at thecriminologistpodcast@gmail.com. That's thecriminologistpodcast@gmail.com. Remember to follow us through our Facebook and Instagram pages at The Criminologist Podcast. New fun images are being added all the time to those feeds. You don't want to miss out. The Criminologist Media Group is also on Twitter. give us a follow at Crim Media Group. That's CRIM Media Group. You may also connect with me, Joseph Arvidsson, or Arshak Gasparyan on LinkedIn, and follow both the Criminologist podcast and the Paragon Group on our LinkedIn pages. Lastly, if you've not already done so, check out and subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Criminologist, for additional content as to the themes of this podcast. Merchandise is available. Reach out if you are interested. We've got some really good, fun stuff. And hey, if you believe in what we're doing on the show, if you're a part of the movement, please spread the word. Tell a friend or a coworker or a colleague about us. Ask them to subscribe to the show. And of course, do so yourself if you've not already done so. And always remember, folks, there's no them, there's only us.
For Uzbekistan, for Moldova, for Montenegro, for Georgia, and different countries for reforming their rehabilitation system.
The Criminologist podcast is a production of the Paragon Group, LLC. For speaking engagements, interviews, program design, or training opportunities, please visit us at theparagongroup.llc.com. If you enjoyed the show, you can find more content and videos on our YouTube channel, The Criminologist. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Both the Criminologist podcast and the Criminologist channel are brought to you by the Criminologist Media Group. Be sure to give us a 5-star review, and thanks for listening.